What if I told you that if you want massive, enduring growth, the kind that, defines generations, you have to completely ignore the metrics that most organizations, most businesses, well, most communities chase?
Yeah, things like immediate speed, superficial size, it's counterintuitive.
Totally. We're talking about dismissing those upfront wins.
What's fascinating here is acknowledging that core paradox of sustainability, isn't it? Long-term institutional strength. It isn't built on those immediate visible metrics.
Hmm.
The sources we've looked at today suggest, maybe surprisingly, that the greatest threat to lasting multiplication isn't always, say, external competition or lack of resources.
Which is what you normally think.
Exactly. But it might be the neglected silence of the early days, what we're calling the seedling stage.
The seedling stage. Okay, this is the heart of our deep dive today. We're looking at this early, really critical phase as the strategic linchpin for sustainability, for any complex community or movement, really.
It's like, think about a startup. It gets huge seed funding, loads of buzz.
Yeah, looks great on paper.
Right. But if it fails to build a stable product or, a healthy internal culture, it just collapses under its own weight.
That fragility.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the sources are warning about, isn't it?
It is. This stage is so often rushed or maybe just misunderstood. And neglecting it, well, it doesn't just stop growth eventually.
No.
It actually ensures that if multiplication does happen, you're just replicating instability, not strength.
Wow. So you're just spreading the weakness.
Pretty much. And the cost is high. You end up with entire initiatives, entire communities left with just a memory of excitement, maybe some initial buzz.
But no lasting impact. No reproducible system.
No lasting witness.
Okay, let's really unpack this then. Our mission today is to understand why this hidden, often quite intentional work, this pivotal move from just potential to actual permanence,
Yeah.
why that's the true measure of success.
And maybe find some practical strategies too, the things that ensure deep rooting, making that future harvest, well, almost inevitable.
Yes. Let's get into those practicals. But first, to really position this pivotal moment, we probably need to see the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
The whole life cycle that the sources outline.
That's a good idea. They define growth through 5 clear stages, sequential stages. And the seedling stage is right there in the middle. It's the hinge.
Okay, what are they?
It starts with presence. You could call that the trust-building architecture.
Okay, presence.
That leads into proclamation.
Hmm.
Think of that as the initial value proposition delivery.
Got it.
Then you hit the seedling stage. This is the stabilization phase we're focusing on.
The crucial bit.
Right. And only after that's solid can you really move effectively to structure and then finally multiplication.
Presence, proclamation, seedling, structure, multiplication.
Okay.
And the core principle seems to be depth before breadth.
Absolutely. It's simple but violated all the time.
Yeah.
The sources keep coming back to that biblical analogy, the farmer in Mark 4. Growth is incremental, first the blade, then the head, then the full grain.
You can't just jump from a tiny shoot to a mature fruit-bearing system overnight.
You can't. While the ultimate energy for growth might be divine or, external in some sense, the sequence itself seems fixed, non-negotiable.
And trying to skip steps.
Well, the research highlights that attempting to skip steps just produces empty husks. They look like success from the outside, maybe high attendance, rapid expansion numbers.
The metrics everyone chases.
Exactly. But they lack internal substance. And this raises a really crucial tension for anyone trying to build something lasting today, right?
How so?
How do you sell the need for slow, hidden, deep growth to stakeholders, to funders, to members who are demanding immediate results and quick wins in this fast-paced world?
Yeah, that is the core tension. We're constantly pressured by the environment, by competition maybe, to show that visible breadth. So, okay, if the quality of the soil determines everything, what actually prepares the ground before the seedling even sprouts?
That foundational work starts with stage 1, presence, relational cultivation, building a really strong foundation of trust.
More than just being there physically.
Oh, much more. It's not just proximity. It's modeled by intentional investment. Think about the example in John 4, Jesus with the Samaritan woman. He took time, cross-cultural barriers, just to engage, to be present with her.
So presence builds the relationship, the trust.
Right. So if you rush straight to proclamation, delivering the mission statement, the instructions, the ask, without establishing that presence first.
So you're just shouting into the wind?
Pretty much, yeah. The sources really emphasize that trust is the absolute bedrock of influence. People will only really listen to instruction or truly adopt a new value system After they know you, trust your commitment.
Presence clears the way, makes the soil receptive.
Makes it receptive. Then comes proclamation. That's the clear, bold delivery of the mission, the core values. Planting the seed, essentially. Proclamation kicks off the life cycle.
Okay, so presence prepares, proclamation plants. Now let's zoom in on the main focus of this deep dive, that critical transition, the seedling stage, the stabilization phase.
Yes. This is where that initial, maybe emotional enthusiasm of engagement gets transformed into something resilient, something lasting, real commitment.
And that doesn't just happen automatically when someone signs up or says yes.
Not at all. The theology of rooting, as the sources put it, dictates that stability has to be intentional. It's not automatic. We see this really powerfully in Colossians 2, verses 6 and 7. Rooted and built up in him, strengthened in the faith.
Rooted and built up, both are active.
Exactly. Those roots are what transform that maybe ephemeral excitement, that initial high into enduring life that can actually withstand stress, challenges, storms.
And this connects back to the parable of the sower, right? We often read it evangelistically.
We do, but its deeper, maybe more strategic insight really speaks volumes about this seedling stage. Matthew 13 warns about that quick germination, the seed that springs up fast.
But it has no deep roots.
Right. And when adversity hits persecution, hardship, even just the cares of the world, the sprout withers. It shows that kingdom multiplication, or maybe any sustainable movement, relies strategically on depth, not just the sheer volume of initial converts or signups.
So the seedling stage is where leaders have to actively channel that initial energy.
Immediately. Channel it into structured, internalized habits and deep connections. Without that intentional formation, the faith or the organizational commitment just stays superficial and profoundly vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what?
To cultural drift, ideological fads, even just minor disagreements or setbacks can derail things if the roots aren't deep.
Okay, so we absolutely see why we need roots. But the tough part is the how. Let's get practical.
Yeah.
Walk us through those intentional strategies leaders need to implement. This is the real work of the stabilization phase, isn't it?
It is. This is the heavy lifting. The research details 3 really non-negotiable components here. First, intentional discipleship pathways.
Pathways, like a roadmap.
Essentially, yes. Mapped out growth architecture. It means having clear stages for progression. Things like new member orientation, specific training in spiritual habits or core organizational practices, pairing people with mentors. Growth shouldn't be accidental. It needs a plan.
That sounds straightforward on paper, but actually creating and maintaining those pathways takes serious commitment, serious resources.
It absolutely does, and that leads into the second strategy, relational anchoring. We need to make sure this doesn't just become another box-ticking exercise.
Right. How do we keep it authentic?
By fostering deep, genuine community. Discipleship or building commitment has to be fundamentally relational. It can't just be a transactional transfer of information.
So not just lectures or big meetings.
Exactly. Roots grow stronger together, in supportive, interconnected relational soil. Think small groups, accountability triads, peer mentorship circles. If the only connection someone has is showing up to a large weekly meeting,
It's fragile.
very fragile. The system lacks redundancy, lacks stability.
Okay, pathways and anchoring. What's the third strategy?
The third is cultivating spiritual practices, or maybe core habit formation, depending on the context. These are the daily or regular disciplines that act like structural supports for this new life.
Like routines.
Absolutely. We need to actively encourage daily engagement with core texts, intentional prayer or reflection, maybe consistent fasting, active service, or contribution. These disciplines are the roots, in a practical sense. They anchor the individual.
To the core mission, to Christ.
Yes, and they enable them to withstand those external storms we talked about. The whole goal here is shifting people from maybe a consumer mentality, just showing up to receive, into a contributor mentality, creating a firm, reproducible foundation in each person.
Pathways, anchoring, practices. That feels like a solid foundation for stabilizing those seedlings. Here, just briefly, to complete the picture, once that stability is there, we move to stage 4, structure.
Right, and structure is the necessary organization required to scale the system, not just rely on the initial leader or leaders.
So it's about institutionalizing the success.
Exactly. Institutionalizing the health achieved in the seedling stage. It involves developing repeatable processes, codifying things that work, building leadership pipelines intentionally, creating governance that supports the mission long term.
Structure is the bridge then.
It's the bridge that enables the final stage, multiplication.
Which is the whole point, right? The reason for doing all this deep work in the first place.
For many movements, yes. Multiplication is the successful, reproducible release of new, mature systems, new communities, new initiatives that carry the full DNA, the health of the parent organization.
And that sustainable multiplication is entirely dependent on how well we handle the seedling stage.
Completely reliant on the health established back then.
Hmm.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, looking back through history, historical movements really confirm this. True, lasting strength lies in stabilizing those seedlings, not just chasing rapid expansion numbers.
Okay, let's dive into some of those historical blueprints. They can make this really concrete. Maybe start with the early church. Acts 2 is often cited.
Yeah, Acts 2.4247. Their growth was explosive, no doubt about it. But the sources argue that the multiplication was actually a byproduct of disciplined, grounded discipleship, not the primary goal itself, initially.
So what were they doing?
The text is clear. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking bread, to prayer. Their first priority was internal formation, building depth.
Community before campaigns, perhaps?
That's a great way to put it. The structure of their community life was so robust, so relational, that the roots were strong enough not just to survive intense persecution and social pressure, but to thrive and expand because of it.
Wow. Okay, who else? The Moravians. They come up a lot in mission history.
They do, 18th century, known globally for this incredible missionary impact, sending people all over the world. But their secret weapon, again, wasn't some clever evangelistic technique. It was their deep spiritual infrastructure.
Infrastructure. How so?
They absolutely prioritized, and I quote loosely here, personal formation and relational investment over external metrics. Their communal life was highly structured. Deep personal devotion. They had these famous 247 prayer watches that went on for decades.
Decades. Wow.
Yeah. And strong, intimate community support. They really understood that you can only send out what you first root deeply within. They were actually a pretty small group, numerically.
Intensely stable.
Intensely stable, which gave them this outsized global impact.
Okay, one more example, the early Methodists.
Mm.
John Wesley, you mentioned structure.
Yes, Wesley offers a fantastic structural example for anyone organizing today. He designed a revolutionary system. It was the absolute opposite of accidental growth.
What was it?
His use of structured class meetings, it was genius, really. Systems architecture for the soul, you might say.
Class meetings, what were they like?
They were mandatory small groups, usually 10 to 15 members, and they met regularly, often weekly, for mandatory accountability, confession, mutual support, prayer.
Mandatory accountability, that sounds intense.
It was. But this system took that initial, often emotional, spiritual enthusiasm, which can be so fleeting, right, and turned it into sturdy, reproducible faith and mutual responsibility. Wesley's success wasn't just his powerful preaching. It was creating this robust structure to stabilize and grow the seedlings he gathered.
Okay, so history definitely backs up this focus on the deep, intentional work of the seedling stage. We see why it's necessary, how it can be done, and the historical precedent. But let's talk about failure. What does neglect look like in practice?
Yeah, what are the early warning signs? The indicators that a movement or a church or an organization is growing shallow and brittle, risking collapse down the line.
Exactly. What should leaders be watching out for?
Well, neglecting the seedling stage pretty much guarantees fragility later on. One immediate consequence you often see organizationally is burnout in leadership.
Why burnout specifically?
Because the burden of the spiritual work or the institutional stabilization ends up resting on just a few key individuals. It hasn't been decentralized into an equipped body through those discipleship pathways.
So the leaders carry everything.
They try to, and that naturally leads to unreproducible discipleship. The shallow roots simply cannot reproduce mature faith or stable new leaders. Multiplication just stalls.
And in today's world, you mentioned cultural drift.
Yes, in our rapidly changing culture, the sources identify this as a major risk. Vulnerability to cultural drift. If a group has weak internal anchoring, weak theology, weak community bonds, weak practices,
The outside world rushes in.
inevitably, external cultural pressures, whether they're political, economic, social, ideological, or theological, they will pull the doctor or the mission off course. You absolutely need strong internal roots to build immunity to those forces.
Okay, so those are the risks. Can we spot the stagnation earlier? Are there tangible symptoms?
Definitely. And leaders need to be honest about looking for them. One major symptom the sources highlight is perpetual immaturity.
Perpetual immaturity.
Yeah, they call them old sprouts. People who, despite maybe years of exposure or membership, remain spiritually or organizationally infantile.
What does that look like?
Shallow understanding of the core mission or beliefs, maybe weak commitment to ethical principles, often a fear of taking action or sharing their faith or contributing meaningfully. Still dependent.
Okay, that's one sign. What else?
Another really key sign is the consumer mentality. These are the passive stakeholders. You see members who attend primarily to be inspired, maybe entertained, to get fed.
But show little expectation of service or sacrifice or
Yeah.
active contribution.
Exactly. They're essentially designed for receiving, but not for reproducing.
Yeah.
And that's a critical failure of the stabilization phase. It means the discipleship hasn't truly taken root.
Right. And the third sign.
Perhaps the most damaging for long-term growth, leadership bottlenecks. This is where the burden of ministry or the core work consistently rests on a small, overworked core group.
Because new leaders aren't being raised up.
Precisely. It signals a clear failure to implement those intentional discipleship pathways we talked about, a failure to equip and empower new leaders. This lack of a functional leadership pipeline makes sustainable expansion into stage 5, multiplication, basically impossible.
It all comes back to that hidden work in the seedling stage. Okay, the sources actually provide a tool for this, right? A kind of checklist.
Yes, a very useful concept. A seedling readiness checklist. It's designed to help leaders assess the soil before they rush into expansion or launching new things. It forces a pause to verify health.
So what dimensions does it check?
It focuses on 4 key strategic dimensions. First is community. Is the soil actually fertile? Is there real trust, accountability? Are the relational systems strong and healthy?
Okay, community. What's second?
Second is context. Is the leadership actually aware of the cultural climate, potential obstacles? Or are they sensitive to the external environment? Basically, are we preparing these seedlings for the actual weather they're going to face out there?
That's crucial. Adaptation. Third.
Third is leadership itself. This assesses the gardener, if you will. Is the current leadership modeling mature faith or commitment? Are they genuinely focused on empowering others, or are they maybe, subtly or not so subtly, centralizing power and control?
Because a mature seedling needs a leader committed to its eventual independence.
Exactly. And finally, fourth is discipleship resources. Do you actually have the necessary water and sunlight readily available? Meaning accessible sound curriculum or training materials, structured mentorship programs already functioning, clear codified pathways for progression that people actually know about and use. Assessing this full picture ensures that the seedling stage is genuinely stabilized before you attempt formal structure or multiplication.
That's incredibly practical. Community, context, leadership, resources. A readiness check. So wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway for the strategic learner listening today?
I think it boils down to this. The seedling stage, this stabilization phase, it's the quiet, almost sacred work that anchors everything. It anchors the present and it secures the future.
And it demands a different set of priorities.
It really does. It demands that we prioritize depth over speed, invisible formation over those visible, immediate metrics everyone else is chasing.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift.
It is. And the integrity of the seed, which often means the core leadership, profoundly influences the eventual harvest. Leaders have to prioritize modeling maturity themselves and providing those clear, reproducible pathways for others to mature. The whole enterprise really hinges on the rootedness established right there in the stabilization phase.
Ensuring that the systems we build can genuinely teach others to teach others, like that Timothy 2.2 model.
Precisely. That's the engine of sustainable multiplication.
So maybe the final thought for you listening today, a question to really mull over. If the seedling stage, this critical stabilization phase, were treated as the most sacred strategic work in your organization, in your community, in your church, how would your current priorities, your staff meetings, your daily resource allocation decisions, how would they be fundamentally different starting today?